Good morning. So I wanted to talk about reconfiguring relationships with horses that might have been allowed to be out of balance to the point of now you're realizing that your relationship is more at the charge of the horse and not really so much at the charge of you. And now you've sought out training and you'd like to have that relationship reconfigured to where the scales have been changed to show you in favor of being in charge. Well, in most cases, that's not an issue to change a dynamic of a horse's relationship with their human. But, and I say this in a way to hopefully help people recognize that the human skill level is going to matter in this case, okay? So, me trying to reconfigure your relationship with your horse by bringing the clarity of information to your horse, saying, look, I'm here to be clear with you about what you're expected to do when I say this, or what you're expected to do when I ask you for this. And it's not up for discussion. See, what happens is horses that become dominant or at the top of the scale in a relationship with someone often think that if something's up for discussion, they're really going to be the ones that are going to win the debate. So it's not really up for discussion. It's more like they bring it to the table to say, I'm not thinking that's something I want to do. And then there's an argument more than a discussion. And often a dominant horse wins that argument. If a dominant horse says, I want to run to the other end of the field before you even take my halter off, what do most more submissive humans do? They just desperately try to get that halter off and let the horse take off, while their nose is practically still in the halter, just to get it done, just to let the horse go, just to whatever. I've seen that so many times where I've worried for somebody's safety that, they're going to get their arm dislocated because the horse literally gets his nose hooked in the nose band of the halter and has not successfully removed his face and is already starting to run off. I've seen that so many times. So that's something that would be up for discussion, or something that I would say would need to be fixed, but your horse is going to say, well, I think this is up for discussion. And often there isn't the stand to say, listen, you can run off as soon as I tell you okay. But until then, you're going to stand here with me while I unbuckle your halter, while I touch you on the neck, and then release you. Now, that's something that would take concentrated planning. That would take an actual decision to do it that way. But when the horse gets away with just running off before he's barely unhaltered, that horse says, look, this is up for discussion, and I'm going to be the deciding factor. Those relationships for me are a challenge to change when the person doesn't have the background of sticking to a plan, doesn't have the background, not somebody who says, I'd rather this didn't happen, but acceptance is kind of how it's been. I'd rather he didn't do that, but that's just what he does. Well, that's not the approach that's going to make for the balancing of the scales. The approach it's going to make for the balancing of the scales is to say, I'd rather this didn't happen. What do I need to do to better explain to him that I'm going to lead him through the gate? I'm going to have him turn back to me while still standing at the gate. He's going to patiently wait for me to latch the gate and turn back to him, unbuckle his halter, put my hand on his cheek, lower the halter off his nose, and then tell him it's okay for him to move his feet. You only have to do that concentrated couple-minute process 3 times before you have trained the horse to now have better manners. But nobody has time for that. Nobody has time for that. Everybody's just willing to accept the behavior. Well, now imagine 20 years, 22 years of accepting that behavior. What kind of relationship balance do you think you have? So a horse that otherwise was allowed to just yank his head out of the halter is now being told, no, you need to show some constraint. You need to express some manners. Now a horse that's being asked to show manners when he didn't ever have to show manners before, it's going to not only come back to the table for discussion, but it's going to come to the table for discussion with some assertiveness. Because apparently, that would be like when the discussion gets heated and people start raising their voices. So we got to imagine that when a horse feels that something that's already been an established rule is now changing and they want to bring it back to the table for discussion, how do you think they raise their voices? How do you think they up the ante? They become more animated. They become more physical. They become more aggressive. They become more powerful. Okay? So what scares me when I deal with those kinds of relationships is the human that's looking to change the scales. Is that human capable? Do they have the skills or do they have the stamina to work through those new discussions? And when I don't feel that that is the case, then I have to make a decision. Because if the horse is going to take up the ante, if the horse is going to turn up the volume, if the horse is going to come to those discussions with a louder opinion, is that person going to get hurt? Is that person going to get hurt? And if I believe the answer to that is yes, and I don't have the ability to teach the person better, then I have to make the decision to not mess with that relationship. If it's been working for 20 years, and I can't teach the human to be different, I'm going to back out of that relationship. I'm going to back out of that relationship. That is not a discussion table I'm going to come to. So I hope that helps people understand that if I were to back out of a relationship that I started where somebody wanted to change the scales with their horses, they wanted to reconfigure a long-standing relationship that was out of balance, and the person is the one that I'm worried about the most as far as being able to make the change, because the discussion will get heated before an agreement will be come to. If a horse has been a long-standing authority in the relationship to that point, I need to make decisions based on people's safety. And if somebody's going to get hurt, I have to make the decision to change my position in the relationship too.